Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right from the studios of KPFT 90.1 FM Houston, your community radio station. We have a great program for you today. Today's program, Obama and Merkel, workers revolt, COVID governor, Senate fears Trump, Manchin, holding hostage. Now, folks, we're going to have a great program for you today. Claudia Clark talks about the Obama-Merkel relationship, and she goes into detail on that in her new book. Republicans continue to fail. They continue to fear Trump. They continue to misguide and mislead about the good old COVID crisis. I don't say good old lightly, but we're going to see some of how their thinking, their machinations actually work. We're also going to talk about Manchin holding the entire country hostage because he doesn't want any sort of progressive values that may somehow infer that the corporatocracy will finally have to pay their fair share of taxes. But before we go there, I want to thank Joseph Malkinskowski, Mike Sherrill, Kenneth Jenkins, Bruce Pollard, and James Matuger for being great supporters of Politics Done Right. We could not possibly support or continue this type of programming, this type of research, this type of doing these things that we do as far as getting you the real story if we didn't have you providing that support. So please continue to support the entire Pacifica Network and public networks in general, because that is the only way that we are going to be able to do what we need to do to ensure that all Americans are told the truth, that all Americans are well informed, because an informed America ensures that they vote their interests. You can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right, on YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTOWILLIES. Before you get started, please remember to keep your community radio station in your minds, KPFT in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends about it. Tell them you know about this station in town, 90.1 FM Houston, that needs your support, that is there to provide that nourishment that we need. 713-526-5738. KPFT.org. Visit us online. Contribute online. KPFT 90.1 FM. You can visit us at kpft.org. It's Striketober. What does that really mean? It seems like workers are feeling empowered. And what are they doing? They're going out there and they're saying, you treat me right, you pay me right, you do me right, or bye-bye. And that is a power that workers should have in a true society, right? Anyhow, there's a tie-in between worker power and what's occurring in the Build Back Better bill with what Joe Manchin is doing as he carries the water for the corporate structure. I'm going to explain that in a minute. I want you to first listen to Fareed Zakaria, and then we'll go ahead and take it on the other side, because what he has to say has a lot of importance to corporate America and what they want to continue doing. Check this out. We'll take it on the other side.
Most workers in the U.S. are not unionized, so they may not be inclined to organize a strike. But that doesn't mean they can't walk off their jobs. And indeed, The latest job data shows that a record 4.3 million workers quit their jobs in August. And it's not just August. Since April, an average of about 4 million workers have quit their jobs every month. It is a trend economists have called the Great Resignation. It's difficult to overstate how extraordinary this is. As Carl Smith notes in Bloomberg, the scale of resignations this year is beyond anything on record. Many believe it echoes what we're seeing with the strikes. Workers seem to be unhappy with long hours, low pay, and generally poor working conditions. And a record number of job openings gives them the freedom to demand more or walk away. This phenomenon has inspired panic in some employers who are desperate for workers. There are fears that the shortage will hurt small businesses or that a rise in wages would make business less competitive in general. But these fears are misplaced. These trends are actually good news, especially for American workers who are in dire need of good news. As the MIT professor David Order recently wrote in The Times, the U.S. economy has long been plagued by a glut of bad jobs. Take a look at pay. Low-skilled American workers are some of the lowest paid in the industrialized world. They make almost 1/3 less per hour than their counterparts in Canada. Low-skilled Norwegian workers are paid more than twice as much. But pay isn't the only problem. MIT's Order writes, American workers also receive less notice and severance when they're fired compared to workers in other wealthy countries. They take less vacation. Unlike their peers in most other rich countries, they don't have guaranteed paid parental leave. Order says that the labor shortages we're seeing, the record job openings alongside record resignation, are a market phenomenon that compels companies to improve on some of these policies to attract workers. We've already seen this in terms of pay. Average hourly earnings for workers have risen by more than $1 in the past year. That's not just good for workers, it's also good for the economy. That's because since the dot-com era of the 1990s, worker productivity has stagnated. But in the past year, productivity growth has picked up significantly, in part because employers are compelled to invest more in the workers they've got. A more productive workforce is actually good for competition. And if this trend continues long term, it could boost the economy's growth. Finally, a glut of open positions gives workers the leverage to experiment. Many workers have left their jobs to start their own businesses, and a rise in entrepreneurship would add some much-needed dynamism to the American economy. So Striketober and the Great Resignation may look chaotic, but this is just the kind of chaos the American economy needs.
And it's important to note, so why is it that Joe Manchin and all these, all the Republicans, Joe Manchin and a few, they don't want family leave. They don't want all these policies that will actually help that would actually help their people, right? Hey, that green screen is coming through. But here's the deal. Here's the real deal. They don't want the American worker to have any sort of incentive to stay home if these employers don't want to pay them their worth. That's the whole idea behind objecting to Build Back Better. They don't want more taxes. They don't want any policies that somehow adversely affect business or cost business more. So what they want to do is they want to say, we want to make life so hard for you. We don't want to have any form of social state that gives you any advantages over anything that will somehow cause you to think twice before taking any job. Look, what we need is exactly what we're starting to have. Good job, Farid Zakaria, for pointing this out. And employers, you want employees, do them right. I'll go to our last video to just show the stupidity. And this one, Hayes, Eric Hayes, you should understand quite well. Take a listen, and then we'll take it from there.
Last week, you admitted that businesses imposing their own vaccine mandates are effective in getting vaccine rates up. You also said you were, quote, a defender of the employer's right to provide a healthy workplace, unquote, if they decide to impose those. Now, I understand you are not comfortable with the government, whether state or federal, imposing mandates on businesses, but wouldn't you be saving lives if you imposed a vaccine mandate on state employees who ultimately work for you?
Well, it would probably increase vaccination rates, but it also would increase the resistance of some. Some would lose their job. It would hurt their families, and it would, in the broader population, also create that controversy and resistance. So it's a balance there, and that's why private businesses should have the opportunity. If they want to require a vaccination in their sensitive workplace, they ought to be able to do that. But government doesn't need to tell them to do that. I'm for reducing mandates across the board in regard to the vaccinations. People will make the right decision over time when they get the right information. And so, sure, Tyson's have required vaccination. Their rate goes up. Others are urging it to happen in their workplace. It goes up there as well. And so I think it's a balance, but what works in Arkansas is not the mandate side of it, but it's the education side and businesses having the prerogative to make their own decision without the government telling them what to do.
Arkansas requires children entering schools to be vaccinated for diphtheria, tetanus, pertussis, polio, measles, mumps, rubella, hepatitis B, hepatitis A, chickenpox. Once it is fully approved by the FDA, would it save lives if you added the COVID vaccine to this list for mandatory vaccines for children?
Look at that more deeply. First of all, those are state-by-state vaccine requirements. And so the federal government has never mandated what happens in the states.
No,
and the schools.
I'm asking
those
you.
Are state-by-state decisions.
Yeah, I'm just talking about what Arkansas mandates, and these are Arkansas mandates.
Absolutely. And so there may be a time in the future that you would want to mandate that in the schools, but that time is not now. We need to have more experience with that. We need to have more public acceptance of it, of the vaccine. And so it could happen down the road. It also depends upon the severity of the COVID outbreak and whether the cases skyrocket again or not. Right now, they're at a very low level in Arkansas. And so it can happen. It may happen, but now's not the right time to do that. We need to know more information and to be able to build public confidence to a greater point, but it is a state decision.
I want to show you Roy Blunt, somebody turning themselves into pretzels to support Donald Trump, to lie about progressives, and to move on. Let's go ahead and get busy. Let me set it up right so I don't get the wrong channels. This one I had to put together. Let me set it up a bit. Roy Blunt is a seasoned politician, a seasoned senator. One would think that he should not fear Donald Trump. One would think that he could actually come out with statements that promote republicanism and at the time protect democracy by taking on what the host has told them about Donald Trump. Check it out, then we'll take it on the other side.
The insurrection took place on November 3rd, Election Day. January 6th was the protest. Was Election Day an insurrection?
I think the election was what it was. There's a process you go through that determines whether or not the early reports were the right reports, and we went through that process. And I'm of the view that the best thing that President Trump could do to help us win majorities in 2022 is talk about the future, and he can be an important part of this 22 effort, but I think better off to talk about the future than to focus on the past in every election. Every election should be about the future, and I think that's what this next one's going to be about.
Well, he still this week was making these false election claims. On Thursday, Arizona should decertify their fake election results immediately. Also Thursday, the Biden administration, are only really good at two things: rigging elections and misinformation. So he's still talking about the past, and a lot of Republican leaders in the House, other members of the Senate, are standing with him on this. Doesn't the party have to disavow the challenge to the election in order to, go forward?
I think President Biden and the Democrats are giving us plenty of things to talk about. We don't need to keep focusing on
But the Republicans are. Republicans keep talking about the past.
I'm not.
And
I don't think many Republicans in the Senate are. I think we're talking about bad tax policies, bad environmental policies, bad national takeover of the election process. There are plenty of things for us to talk about, and I think we're talking about them. I'm there every day, and I hear Republicans concerned, as they should be, about the process that the Democrats are going through.
But they're also
right now.
denying the reality of January 6th. Republicans refusing the commission, not joining the House Select Committee. Steve Bannon, only 9 Republican House votes to punish him for violating a House subpoena.
Well, I think a lot of this discussion is obviously driven by the media, just like this is here today. We could be talking about Senate rules. We could be talking about tax policy.
Well,
we
if
could
Republicans
be talking
were
about these new
accepting the
entitlement
reality,
policies.
It's not the media that's going against the reality of what happened on January 6th. It was the worst attack on our government, on our democracy since the Civil War.
Well, I agree with that. In fact, on January the 20th, I was at the podium at the Capitol chairing the inauguration, and that peaceful transition of power that we saw that day is one of the most important things we do. And I was able to chair the inauguration 4 years earlier, and 4 years later, it was the same important message we sent to the world, and I think we effectively did that.
Well, to that point, if the former president keeps denying the reality of the election and of Joe Biden being the president, should that disqualify him from being a candidate, as he suggests he wants to be in 2024?
Well, there are constitutional provisions about being a candidate, and having opinions that other people may not agree with is not one of those provisions. He can be a candidate if he wants to be, but again, I think what President Trump could do that would be most helpful right now would be a focus on the policies that aren't working. His policies at the border were working, his regulatory policies were working, his tax policies were working, but we see that those policies for Democrats with these narrow majorities they have aren't working. I hope that's where he focuses, but I don't manage his time or his.
But if he doesn't
comments.
concede the election, would you support him in 2024?
Well, the election for 2020 is over. I'm focused on 2022, and it's a long time between now and 2024.
He has basically excommunicated Liz Cheney from the party, as has Kevin McCarthy, primarying her and all the rest, just for trying to investigate what really happened. What was the conspiracy behind January 6th? Do you think there's a place in the Republican Party for Liz Cheney?
I think Wyoming voters are going to decide if there's a place for her in the House or not. But it's a broad party with lots of things we ought to be focusing on. I think, again, what defines the future of the Republican Party is how we react to the debate that's going on right now. Democrats are having an incredibly hard time getting where they'd like to be. They've decided that they've got a mandate when there's clearly no mandate. The Senate couldn't possibly be closer. The House majority is the closest Democrats have had in 170 years. And frankly, the only thing that Joe Biden and Donald Trump agreed about in 2020 was they both wanted the election to be all about Donald Trump. There is no mandate. Pretending you do is going to have real consequences in both 22 and 24.
Now, before I go into any basics there, Andrew Mitchell, why didn't you push back when the new phrase that Republicans are using? And I want everybody to be aware of this. This is very important because they know how to use phraseology. The national takeover of elections is what they're calling bills to avoid voter suppression, voter fraud, and having local officials overturn local elections, okay, or national elections. Remember, the bills in Congress are to prevent overthrow of the popular, what people have voted for, to prevent voter fraud, and to prevent all this voter suppression that Republicans are doing in 26 states. By allowing these people to come onto TV and call it nationalizing elections, you do a disservice to Americans because they start to use that nomenclature, they start to use that narrative, and that's the false narrative. The voter bills is a bill that Republicans and Democrats alike have always voted on in order to protect the American voter. Now what they're trying to institute is a form of fascism. Now also, she never pushed back when he said Trump's tax policy worked. Really? All the taxes went to the wealthy and to corporations who used it to buy back stock that made the wealthier as their capital gains increased because of said tax buyback. When it comes to tariffs, guess who paid the tariffs? The poor people. When their semiconductors and all these things went up in prices, who paid it again? The tax came into the coffers, but it was paid for by the American people. No pushback. That's what I'm talking about. But you see how they're attacking, Democrats are fighting among each other. But when these clowns come on TV and spill, they sound like they're sensible. We've allowed it. We've got to stop that. That is why you have a Politics Done Right, to pull the crap out of what these people say. A message to Joe Manchin. Joe Manchin just came out and gave a press conference. Everybody thought the press conference was going to be out to say, we finally got an agreement on the infrastructure bill as well as the Build Back America bill, where we get all the necessary social programs that have been neglected for decades after decades after decades. But instead, he comes out and he says, there's no way that the progressives holding this bill hostage will somehow allow him to vote for the bill. Let me tell you something. There's only one person. Progressives are not holding the infrastructure bill hostage. What we have here is Joe Manchin holding America hostage. Working class America hostage. That is what we're looking at. He comes and he says the bill as it is today is not, it has smoke and mirrors, and that eventually it's not going to be $1.7 trillion, but $3.4 trillion. Did he ever say that about any energy bill that's passed, about any energy infrastructure that puts out there that year after year as they pollute the environment, that somehow the companies that he represents, the oil companies, the coal companies, that they get the things that they want? You never hear that. You never hear a peep out of that. He says that they're not negotiating in good faith. Who is not negotiating in good faith? Remember, important to discuss. 48 senators support the bill. We need 50. That 2 senators think they are more important than 48, and they are willing to let the president's bill go down the drain because 2 out of 48, 96% of the people are for the bill, but you are not for it, so it's not going to happen. You said the progressives want to either have it their way or the highway. Progressives and moderates support it. 96% of them. It is just 2 of you that are giving trouble. Who is actually saying it's my way or the highway? Folks, don't allow a snow job and the media to take this up and make it seem as if progressives and Democrats are in disarray. They're not. 2 senators are holding America hostage. Listen to what he had to say, and then we'll finish it at the other end.
I've heard a lot of the mischaracterizations of my position since the president met with the House Democrats last Thursday, and I would like to make an attempt to clear up any confusion about where I stand on the legislation that's working its way through Congress. In all of my years of public service, and I've been around for a long time, I've never seen anything like this. The President of the United States has addressed the House Democratic Caucus twice recently to urge action on the bipartisan infrastructure bill, which sometimes we refer to as the BIF bill. Last week, Speaker Pelosi urged the importance of voting and passing the BIF bill before the president took the world stage overseas, and still no action. In my view, this is not how the United States Congress should operate, or in my view, has operated in the past. The political games have to stop. Twice now, the House has balked at the opportunity to send the BIF legislation to the president. As you've heard, there are some House Democrats who say they can't support this infrastructure package until they get my commitment on the reconciliation legislation. It is time to vote on the BIF bill, up or down, and then go home and explain to your constituents the decision you made. And I've always said, if I can't go home and explain it, I can't vote for it, and if I can, I will. I've worked in good faith for 3 months, for the past 3 months, with President Biden, Leader Schumer, Speaker Pelosi, and my colleagues on the reconciliation bill, and I will continue to do so. For the sake of the country, I urge the House to vote and pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill. Holding this bill hostage is not going to work in getting my support for reconciliation bill. Throughout the last 3 months, I've been straightforward about my concerns that I will not support a reconciliation package that expands social programs and irresponsibly adds to our $29 trillion in national debt that no one seems to really care about or even talk about. Nor will I support a package that risks hurting American families suffering from historic inflation. Simply put, I will not support a bill that is this consequential without thoroughly understanding the impact that it'll have on our national debt, our economy, and most importantly, all of our American people. Every elected representative needs to know what they are voting for and the impact it has, not only on their constituents, but the entire country. That is why we must allow time for complete transparency and analysis on the impact of changes to our tax code and energy and climate policies to ensure that our country is well positioned to remain the superpower of the world while we inspire the rest of the world towards a cleaner environment. And this all can be done. I, for one, won't support a multi-trillion-dollar bill without greater clarity about why Congress chooses to ignore the serious effects of inflation and debt that have on our economy and existing government programs. For example, how can I in good conscience vote for a bill that proposes massive expansion of social programs when vital programs like Social Security and Medicare face insolvency and benefits could start being reduced as soon as 2026 in Medicare and 2033 in Social Security? How does that make sense? And I don't think it does. Meanwhile, elected leaders continue to ignore exploding inflation, that our national debt continues to grow, and interest payments on the debt will start to rapidly increase when the Fed has to start raising interest rates to try to slow down this runaway inflation. With the factors in mind, and all of these factors that we've spoken about, I've worked in good faith for months with all of my colleagues to find a middle ground on a fiscally, and I repeat that, a fiscally responsible piece of legislation that fixes the flaws of the 2017 Trump tax bill that I thought was weighted far, far too far for the high-end earners and the needs of the American families and children. However, as more of the real details outlined in the basic framework are released, what I see are shell games, budget gimmicks that make the real cost of the so-called $1.75 trillion bill estimated to be almost twice that amount if the full time is run out, if you extended it permanently, and that we haven't even spoken about. This is a recipe for economic crisis. None of us should ever misrepresent to the American people what the real cost of legislation is. While I've worked hard to find a path to compromise, it's obvious compromise is not good enough for a lot of my colleagues in Congress. It's all or nothing, and their position doesn't seem to change unless we agree to everything. Enough is enough. It's time our elected leaders in Washington, all of us, stop playing games with the needs of the American people and holding a critical infrastructure bill hostage. While there's opportunity in the reconciliation bill that we can all agree on, and we've been talking about this for months. Again, to be clear, I will not support the reconciliation legislation without knowing how the bill will impact our debt and our economy and our country. And we won't know that until we work through the text. For the sake of our country, I am urging all of my colleagues in the House to vote and pass the bipartisan infrastructure bill. It's bipartisan, 69 votes. We worked on that for many, many months. As I've said before, holding that bill hostage is not going to work to get my support of what you want. It's what we should all agree on and work through the process. I'm open to supporting a final bill that helps move our country forward, but I'm equally open to voting against a bill that hurts our country. And I've been very clear about that also. And most importantly, hurts every American. Let's work together, and I mean that. Let's all work together on getting a sensible reconciliation package, a package that really strengthens our nation and makes us better and leads the world. Thank you all.
Now, if you listen to what Joe Manchin had to say there, does what he said really make any sense? It makes absolutely no sense. Here's what I think we should ultimately do. No, you don't get the Build Back Better bill, meaning the social program, the social infrastructure done. No bipartisan bill, period. And why do we say no bipartisan bill, period? Because once again, we asked progressives and people who haven't voted because they believe their vote never matters. We asked them to vote in 2020. We asked them to vote in 2018. They came out in 2018. They came out in 2020. What do they have to show for it? A bipartisan infrastructure bill that helps just the same people that always get the help. It is time to end it. It's all or nothing. We all rise together or we fall together. Which one would you prefer? Claudia Clark is the author of the upcoming book just released yesterday, Dear Barack, The Extraordinary Partnership of Barack Obama and Angela Merkel. Disruption Books, October 19, 2021 is the one publishing it. She received her Bachelor's of Arts degree in History and Public Policy from Michigan State University. She was the president of the College Democrats at Michigan State and was active in Amnesty International Now and pro-choice groups. Clark holds a Master's of Arts in Labor and in Industrial Relations from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign, a Master's in U.S. History with an emphasis on women's history from San Jose State University, and a Master's of Social Work, MSW, from the University of Michigan with an emphasis in community organizing. She and her husband resides in Berlin, Germany, where she previously served as National Get Out the Vote, GoTV coordinator for the Democrats Abroad, the Germany chapter. Welcome to Politics Done Right, Claudia. How are you doing?
Good, thanks. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, I mean, actually, when all this was happening in Germany, the new elections, etc., I kind of followed it with the expectation that we would start to see a curve away from what we have been seeing, not only here in the United States, but throughout the world on sort of a rightward move. What can you first tell me about the administration of Angela Merkel?
Angela Merkel, for the last, 16 years, has been the head of Germany's Christian Democratic Union, or center-right party. And initially, when she started, she was very, very, she was conservative. But as the years progressed, the longer she was in office as chancellor, the more she moved her center-right party to the center. And so she made a lot of policy decisions in the later years of her chancellorship. For example, opening the German borders to Syrian refugees, to attempting to phase Germany away from using coal, that kind of thing. And that started, in the late 2015 kind of time period. So, And as she has done that, it has created a dichotomy in Germany, because on the one hand, her party members were upset with her for moving the party too far to the right. Her party members were concerned because she moved too far to the left or center. And on the other hand, the people from the liberal side still thought she was too conservative. So she was kind of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. And it was interesting because she saw the writing on the wall in 2017 when she was elected for her fourth term. While it is true she won re-election, her party did the worst that it had done since I think it was World War II. And a lot of people were concerned because it was some of her policies. And then the following year, in 2018, the other various German states, Germany is made up of 16 Bundesstaates, right? And they had state elections, and her party was taking a beating in that regard as well. Meanwhile, the far right party, the AfD, and the Greens were building momentum, and so she made the decision to step down after her term ended this past September. And what's interesting is that we still don't know who's going to be chancellor. They're still kind of working out the details. But the candidate that was replaced her in the Christian Democratic Union, he took a really bad beating. He had done worse. The Christian Democratic Union had done worse than they'd ever done. And some people, Some people think it was because of the quality of the candidate. I try to stay kind of neutral on what happened and having an opinion. But I really think it's more than that. I think this is very typical. We see this in the United States too. 16 years of having one party control a government, it's a long time. And people want to change. And that was very evident as early as 2017 that people want to change. And so I'm not surprised that her party didn't do as well as expected. What I am surprised is how incredibly close it was, because I kind of expected it to be a landslide, because things were indicating that people want to change. They wanted it in a drastic way.
But would you have expected a landslide on the left side or the right side?
I was expecting, it. We were hearing it pretty much on the left side. And it looks like the new chancellor will be from the center left party, the Social Democrat.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. But we don't know for sure. But not only that, but the way, the German government works is that they form a coalition, the parties that receive the most votes.
I think they have enough votes if the Social Democrats and the Green Party unite, right?
Right. Yes. And the holdout right now is the Free Democratic Party, and that's kind of they're the free market.
Right.
Market party. They don't believe in government regulation. It's kind of let the markets.
They're the neoliberals.
Yeah. And so it's looking like I'm in the States now, but I'm still trying to follow what's going on in Germany. But it looks like they're really close to forming a coalition between the three. And then when the way they form coalitions in Germany is that once they decide that they want to form a government together, then they choose their chancellor. Then what they do is they put a platform together, and then they decide who is going to be cabinet positions from which party. And so that all kind of comes together. Mm-hmm.
I think that is a healthier system anyway, because it gives a lot of opinions. It doesn't, you don't have to be one or the other, because, at the end, you can actually get a coalition put together that represents more than one brand.
Yeah. It's interesting because in the United States, it's kind of a winner take all thing.
Exactly.
And that I don't think is particularly fair. But the one thing that I think is really interesting about this is right after in the days right after the election, there were talks, because the way the vote looked, the center left party, or the CPU, received the most votes, and then the CDU, and then the Green Party candidate, and then the FDP. So that was kind of the ranking, and it looked like the Green Party and the FDP, the Free Democratic Party, so the people that came in third and fourth, they were going to decide with whom they wanted to form a coalition.
Right.
Were they going, and they were going to decide, okay, who's going to be the new chancellor? Is it going to be Scholz from the left, or is it going to be Laschet from the right? And that was a little interesting because it seemed like it should be the other way around. It should be, okay, it seemed like it should have been one of Scholz or Laschet deciding with whom they wanted to work, but it was the other. It's opposite, and I think it's really interesting. And
in other words, the minor parties were the one picking who the winners are going to be, as opposed to these guys saying, we are going to choose you and you to come on the coalition.
And it's kind of counterintuitive, because the voters had spoken, and based upon the voting, the voters wanted Scholz to be the chancellor. But it looked like there was a possibility, because Laschet initially, I still don't think he has officially resigned yet.
Right.
But it looked like, despite what the voters wanted, these other people could still come in and decide that they wanted Laschet instead as chancellor. So it's kind of interesting, and it's counterintuitive to what we have in the States. But I do think it is definitely a lot healthier, because this whole winner take all thing that the United States has, you win all you need is 260 electoral votes, and
But it's actually worse in the United States in that we don't really have a democracy. 2 senators per state. When a state have half a million people and the other one has 40 something million, it doesn't make any sense. Okay, let's go ahead and talk about your book. What got you into writing that book, Barack? The love affair between Barack and Angela Merkel.
That's a complicated question. I happened to, we're still living in the States at the time, and I happened to turn on the final press conference between Obama and Merkel in 2016, post-election. It was Obama's final trip to Berlin as president. And I had been following Merkel's career because we knew, my husband and I knew at some point we were going to move to Germany. And I just remember Merkel being so visibly upset when a reporter asked her, what are you going to do? This is your last working relationship with one another in a formal capacity. What are you going to do? And Merkel just looked like she was about to cry, which is so atypical of her.
Right.
And so I started thinking, okay, this is interesting. We'll see what happens. And then I happened to watch the first encounter between Merkel and Trump in March of 2017. And when Merkel visited Washington and Trump would not even shake Merkel's hand. And It was, total 180. And I learned that Obama was visiting Germany later that year in May it was the 500th anniversary of Reformation. Mm-hmm. And I learned that Obama's very, very first trip overseas post-presidency was to Berlin to visit Merkel. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay, there's something here. There's something really interesting about their friendship. And at this point, my husband and I knew we were moving to Germany. I don't speak German, despite my best efforts. I have trouble with the language. So I knew I needed to do something constructive with my time. And I figured, I'm concerned with what's going on in the world with Brexit and with the alt-right taking control in Poland. And the telling thing about Obama and Merkel's relationship is for all intents and purposes, they're from different political parties.
Right.
But they put their differences aside and worked together because they knew it was in the best interest. And so I thought, this is a policy lesson. Other world leaders can learn from this, that in today's globalized world, it's more imperative now than it was since World War II, since the Cold War, that allied world leaders learn to work together. Mm-hmm. And while that's the case, you see on the other extreme, you've got more, Trump and Brexit, you've got countries trying so hard to separate themselves because they think they're trying to keep their borders safe. And I actually think that's the worst approach because, with wars no longer entail just invading another country militarily, but somebody can do plot a terrorist attack from their apartment in Belgium for bombing in Paris. And it's imperative that world leaders be able to share intelligence and talk and communicate with one another. And I'm just concerned with what the toll and that things are taking the other direction.
Yeah, absolutely. So now, when you saw the relationship between Barack and you said that he flew, the first flight was to Germany. How was his reception? And did they really play that up pretty big out there, or?
They made a big deal about it. I think there were approximately 7,000 participants that visited. Because what it was an open forum where Obama and Merkel spoke with a couple of clergy members mm-hmm. and some other activists. Mm-hmm. And so, they had the forum, and then you looked around the crowd, and there were people who had signs saying, "Welcome back, Mr. President," and "Can we keep you, Mr. President?" and "Du bist ein Berliner." So you could feel the momentum. And I moved to Germany in September of 2017, and the Germans, I saw a lot of how the Germans liked Obama when I was doing my research, but since I've been here, it is legitimate. People would, when they found out I was an American, they would just ask me, why isn't Obama president anymore? Can he become president again. And then, my broken German, I'm like, nein, no. And then it's, well, why not? And so, in my broken German, I have to try and tell them because our constitution won't allow it. Well, why is that? That's dumb. So it was the Germans absolutely loved him. And even now. And so, and I think that played a large part in the relationship between Merkel and Obama is because she knew how popular he was.
I still remember that huge thing that he had in Berlin. I think it was Berlin when he had that big thing in the park, and thousands and thousands and thousands of people showed up to that. It was amazing. 200,000 people. Imagine that, and he wasn't even running for a place in Germany. But it's interesting that you said Merkel and Obama they were from two different parties, which is true based on the names of the parties. But ironically, right, places like England and places like Canada, Germany, their center right look nothing like what we like to call center right. They believe in all these social programs that we need here in the United States, but we are called socialists for wanting them. Your thoughts on that?
Right. Well, yeah, and when I talk to people, I'm very careful to say, technically speaking, they are from different political parties, but you're not comparing apples to apples because the Republican Party now in the United States, it's not the fiscal conservative party of, say, Reagan. It has been taken over by extremists and religious right wing, and it is definitely not the fiscal conservative and the free market. That is definitely not the case. So I think that the Republican Party of today in the United States is almost equivalent to what is taking form in the rest of Europe right now. In Germany, the AfD, which stands for Alternative for Deutschland, and that's the anti-immigrant, that's the anti-Semitism. It's building momentum in Germany, but it's still a minority. And the center right is a lot more. The center right in Europe, not just Germany, but in Europe, is a lot more. It really, truly is center, and it is really difficult to try and compare political parties.
It is amazing. That is what I've noticed in because you go to you ask a conservative government in England or Merkel, would you like to go ahead and change your healthcare system to a more free market based healthcare system? They'll say, "Are you crazy? The people won't allow that." Which is an interesting thing. Now, as far as your book is concerned, I know it was released yesterday. What's the reception? Are you really getting it out there, or?
Yeah, I'm pleasantly surprised at the reviews that I'm getting. I shouldn't say surprised. I'm excited about it because
excited. That's the right word.
One of the things what I really wanted to focus on was the positive side. I'm disturbed at what's happening in terms of how negative and nasty things have gotten. And in one of the reviews I've gotten, it was called a delightful, because it was, in a world where politics is often so scathing and so nasty. I talk about how well they got along, and yes, they had their differences, but despite their differences, they worked together and they learned from each other, and they helped one another, and how it's a nice change of pace, and I think that's what people will need to see. Now, if you want, I make no bones about my disdain for Trump. But Trump wasn't the focus of the book. I talk about Trump at the very, very end when I talk about how he managed to undermine everything Merkel and Obama had done together.
Right.
But the purpose of the book was not to bash Trump. It wasn't to bash Brexit. It was more of this is how world leaders can what they can accomplish when they put their mind to it, when they put democracy and the well-being of society above their own personal beliefs or tastes.
Now, living in Germany and coming for some time now, I guess you lived in Germany for about 3 years or so, from 17 to now, right? coming back to the
we're still living it.
How do you? By the way, are you? Is your husband German, or you just?
No, we're both American. We're both Americans, and there are a lot of reasons why we decided to move to Germany. I've got family there, but a lot of it was my husband was, he's an engineer and he worked in Silicon Valley,
right.
and he was tired of the 8-hour work weeks. I got death threats from people because I supported the Affordable Care Act.
Gotcha.
And I felt like I was a stranger in my own country. I felt my beliefs better aligned with what those of the European Union.
So let me ask you this. That is amazing that you're saying that. And I'm interested because I've interviewed people that have permanently relocated to Canada, permanently relocated to England, UK. And now your relocation to Germany, are you becoming a German citizen as well, or a German resident? How does that work?
My husband has just permanent residence. Because I came with him, because he's had the work permit, I was able to come in with him, but he could get residency sooner than I could. And the minute he could actually qualify, we'd been here long enough and he had made enough money. He applied for residency, and we're talking about, we have a couple more years before we can actually qualify for German citizenship.
Right.
And we would have to, Germany doesn't allow dual citizenship, so we would have to give up.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. So Panama, where I'm from, we can be dual citizens. I didn't know that didn't occur in Germany.
Now, the interesting thing is with this recent election, one of the things the SPD does want to look at is granting dual citizenship.
Right.
So by the time we're eligible, and I think it's 2 or 3 more years, it might be a moot point, and we might be able to do both. I'm on the fence on whether I want to give up my U.S. citizenship. We have to file U.S. taxes, so we have to file U.S. taxes and German taxes. So it's a pain.
Right.
We don't really don't foresee going back to the United States. So my position is I don't really care. Right. I just want to be able to vote. Mm-hmm. And I can still, I can't vote in Germany, but I still can vote in the United States. So.
Right. Well, I mean, the thing about it is you have time to think about it. And if one doesn't have to give up a U.S. citizenship, you really don't. So if they change it, that's great. I intend to keep both of my citizenships. I think there's value in that. But that is great. Now, we're coming close to the end. Is there anything that you want to tell me that I should have asked you that I didn't?
I think the one thing that I would like to emphasize about that about the book is that it is something that it provided an opportunity for 2 people who skeptical of one another, and how they went from being skeptical of one another to, Merkel cried when she said goodbye to Obama for the final time. And you tell that to Germans and they're like, she did what? Because it is so
uncultural, so uncharacteristic. Yeah, out of character.
Right. And so I think it's important for people in today's globalized world, as polarized as we are. I'm a political activist myself. I've spent my entire life being a political activist. And I understand more than anyone, the fine line between selling out and compromise. Mm-hmm. It's very gray. And I think we've gotten to the point where nobody wants to work with someone from the other side because they don't want to be seen. And look at what it has gotten us. And we're having culture wars on a public health issue that should be resolved, but people have turned it into culture wars and political. And that is just silly and it's dangerous. And I think the lesson you can learn from Obama and Merkel is they didn't agree on a lot of things. They compromised. And as a result, the Paris Climate Agreement was signed, the Iran nuclear. And we need to get away from this. I'm not going to, this person voted for a Republican, this person went to an anti-gay church 20 years ago, so I'm not going to vote for them, or I'm not going to work with. That's dangerous, and that's getting us nowhere. And so I think we need to shift the conversation back to saying it's okay to work with somebody from it's okay to have differences of opinion. You work together and you compromise, and that just isn't happening anymore.
You know what, Claudia, I think that is a great place to end. And I think that sentiment is very important for all of us who are activists, journalists, activist writers, activists on the floor, to actually take that into account. It's not a sellout to want to work with somebody that may be diametrically opposed to your beliefs. Thank you so kindly, Claudia Clark, author of the upcoming book, Dear Barack, The Extraordinary Partnership of Barack Obama and Angela Merkel. Go read the book. It has great, prescient information for you. Thank you so kindly, Claudia, for having been on Politics Done Right.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please remember to keep your community radio station in your minds. Keep KPFT in your minds. Talk about it. Tell your friends about it. 90.1 FM, Houston. They can listen as well at kpft.org. They can contribute to us at kpft.org. You can get Politics Done Right Mondays through Fridays on Facebook Live at facebook.com/Politics Done Right. On YouTube Live at politicsdoneright.com/YouTube. Please do not forget to follow me on Twitter for updates. My handle is at Egberto Willies, at EGBERTO WILLIES. Folks, we are at the end of the program. I hope you enjoyed what we had to offer. We will continue to give you fresh data, fresh programming every single week from Politics Done Right. My name is Egberto Willies. This is Politics Done Right. And you know how I end this baby. I am what? Out. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right. Welcome to Politics Done Right. I am your host, Egberto Willies. This is a progressive program that will take the mystery out of politics. This is the program that will encourage you to make sure government becomes we the people. Whether you are liberal, progressive, conservative, or otherwise, you get to air your point of view. We are an independent media outlet that, unlike mainstream media beholden to corporations, we only owe allegiance to you. Remember, you can also send me a tweet at EGBERTOWILLIES. That is at Egberto Willies. Let us engage. It is Politics Done Right.